Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting of March 20th, 2019. Can I have the roll call, please?
Peg Coniff. Here. Salem Derby.
Present.
Omar Gomez.
Here.
JP Kaczynski.
Here.
Bill Lynch.
Here.
Joe McCoy.
Here.
Tom Peak.
Here.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Owen Zara.
Here.
Okay, go ahead, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of March 6th?
I'd like to make a few changes, if I may,
Sure.
to the minutes, to reflect the comments I made. I had, with regard to the appointment that we discussed last time, I would like to clarify that I thought the comments were inappropriate for the purposes of appointment to the Human Relations Committee. I would like to add that language. The Community Relations Committee.
Okay.
I make a motion to amend the minutes in accordance to Councilor Kozinski's request.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second to approve the minutes as amended.
We have to approve the amendment.
Amendment first. Okay, all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?
I move we adopt the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay, motion, a second to approve the March 6th minutes as amended. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Okay, that concludes for minutes. Public speak time. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to address the council for anything other than what's on a public hearing? Just come to the podium. If you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, council members. My name is John Frost. I have lived at 250 Main Street in Easthampton for the last 4+ years. I am a disabled person. This winter season, I have had to detour into the streets quite often due to homeowners or business owners who have failed to adequately remove or treat snow and ice on their sidewalks. I have made numerous complaints to the police, who are charged with enforcement and citing violators per the city ordinance related to snow and ice removal. The ordinance online says that homeowners, property managers, business owners have 12 hours from the end of a winter storm to clear their sidewalks of snow and ice. Some of these folks may have to treat their sidewalks for snow or ice every morning and every night to be in compliance with that ordinance, because the public can walk a sidewalk at any hour of the day or night. Apparently, the police refuse to cite any of the violators who continually flout the ordinance, even with video evidence. Why is it that the police refuse to cite violators? I, for one, would like to know. I have a meeting with the mayor and police chief on March 28th at 3:30 p.m. in the mayor's office. I urge you to require the police to enforce the snow and ice ordinance when a complaint comes in, and not up to 10 hours later this year when winter begins again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else from the council, from the public, like to come to just state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Ann Tallheimer. I live in Holyoke. Is it okay for me to address the body?
Yeah. As long as you admit it, so.
I just want to check, because sometimes in Holyoke they get real
time.
pokey about that. So, anyway, my name is Ann Tallheimer. I live at 8 Clark Street in Holyoke, and I'm here to speak in favor of item 11C on the agenda, which is Councilor Zaret's firearms safety and against gun violence resolution. I'm here in a couple of different capacities. I currently serve as the survivor membership lead for Massachusetts for the Massachusetts chapter of Moms Demand Action. So I'm here in that capacity. I also serve as an Everytown Survivor Fellow. In 2017, I was one of 35 people selected nationwide to participate in a national training program. I'm one of just 2 people in Massachusetts who serve in this capacity, and the only one from Western Massachusetts. And it is a leadership program in which we are trained on story sharing training to talk about our own stories of surviving gun violence. And that is the primary reason why I'm here. For those of you who have lived in Western Massachusetts for more than 26 years, you will remember what I'm about to talk about. I was an 18-year-old student at Simon's Rock College of Bard on December 14th, 1992, when a classmate of mine was able to legally quickly and cheaply obtain a Chinese-made SKS, which he brought back to campus, loaded with the bullets that he'd had shipped to campus in the week prior, and then walked from end to end of our college campus firing at anything and everything that moved. We discovered after the fact that he had enough ammunition to kill us all. He murdered my friend Galen Gibson, who died in the library. He murdered my professor, Dr. Nyakunyan Saez, who is the reason I became an educator. He wounded 4 others who survived and left a small, tight-knit campus in shock. And this was 26 years ago. And so every time there is another mass shooting, every time there is another report, every time we hear about toxic gun culture over and over and over again, it is like reliving that night. I have been a survivor of gun violence longer than I haven't. My entire adult life has been lived in the shadow of gun violence. And this is why resolutions like these, even though they may not have policy weight or legislative lawmaking changes behind them, though they certainly can, are crucial and fundamentally important to communities. Looking at all the different pieces of these things and making sure that while we are respecting the rights of the Second Amendment and responsible gun owners who safely store and safely carry and follow all those important legislations and things to keep us safe, we are also looking at all the things behind toxic gun culture. And we're looking at the ways we can keep our communities safe, our churches safe, our schools safe, and our communities safe. And I urge you in the strongest possible terms to adopt this resolution for Easthampton. You will be among forerunners in the community and in Western Massachusetts in doing this. And I wish we could get something like this happening in Holyoke, but I'm so grateful that it is happening here. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you. I am open to any questions, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else from the public like to address the council? Please just go up and state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Reverend Jennifer Valentine. I live at 2 Spring Street here in Easthampton. And I, too, am a member of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I hold the role of faith outreach lead for our region. And I am also here to support the gun violence prevention resolution. And I have not much of a story other than to say that every single person in our country deserves to be able to, especially here in our city, deserves to feel safe and not have to be concerned about what other things are going on around them so that they can focus. And specifically, I think about our children who have lots of learning and development to do. And without, they have enough distractions in their life without that. And so our efforts to make our world a better, safer place requires those of us who are here in our little world to do what we can to make our world safe. So I also urge you to support that resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone else from the public who'd like to speak to the council about anything other than public hearing? No? Okay, thank you very much for the information. Communications, elected boards, committees, and Councilor Zaret, this may be a good time then to address your resolution if you'd like.
Would you like to do it now, or do we want to do the rules? It's up to you, Mr. President. I'm certainly happy
Is it
to.
being sent, are we sending it to the subcommittee?
He has to.
That resolution, so.
We could
Unless we-
vote not
unless we
to, but I
suspend our
think
rules.
it's, I would rather it be sent to committee
Oh, okay.
myself.
Okay. Then we'll wait.
And let me tell you what, I am absolutely in favor of it, but I'd like to hear from the police department on it, because it's gun violence and it deals with the police force. Counselor Zaret has gotten the chief behind it, so this is good. And I'd just like to hear from him at the committee level, if that's all right with the
Yeah,
council.
sure, I think so. Then I guess any other communications or notices that, Councilor Zaret? Sorry.
Yes, and thank you. I just want to say quickly, thank you to the Moms Demand members that came out tonight. And I agree with Councilor Rist. I think especially with the gravity of this resolution, we should make sure it's discussed appropriately at the subcommittee level. As much as I'd like to pass it tonight, if we could. Anyhow, Couple announcements. As you're aware, I've made a few announcements previously. Easthampton has a public contingent. It's not limited to municipal officials. Marching in the Northampton Pride Parade this May 4th, Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. I don't anticipate lightsaber duels that day, but you never know. So any interested residents or people associated with the city, business owners, etc., feel free to get in touch if you want to march. There will be a fundraiser this Saturday at New City Brewery from 6 to 10 with live music from 7 to 10. There's a bunch of acts involved. And we've also gotten a lot of support from the business community as well as private citizens with donations, so thank you. Also, this Saturday, the high school is Rise Against Hunger. It's an event to basically package food for impoverished nations and to help fight against famine. And also, in terms of regional government, Senator Ed Markey is going to be speaking in Northampton this Sunday, I think at Northampton High, I believe at 6 o'clock. About the Green New Deal. So if that's something people are interested in, definitely head over to our neighbor down the Pike Path, Northampton. And that's all I have.
Oh, thank you. Councilor Peak.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I was able to attend that Sierra Club event that I was mentioning at the last meeting, where it was specifically addressed towards city councilors and select board members, and specifically talking about what can be done at a local level to help fight climate change. And it was very eye-opening. There were a handful of policies that they suggested that I wasn't really aware were tools that we had at our disposal. I feel like there's a lot of research to be done, so at this time I'm not making any specific proposals, but I did want to remind everyone that I sent out the slides for all the presentations, not just the ones I was able to attend that day. And I'd encourage you to look them over because there was some really interesting stuff in there about grants and programs and whatnot.
Great, thanks for the update. Anyone else on this? Any more communications? Let me see. Okay, we can try to start in here. Oh, Mayor Communications, there we go.
Good evening. I have actually, just for the record, I wanted to clarify under finance on the agenda where it says the request to adopt MGL Chapter 32B, Section 19, and the minutes from the last meeting reflected just consideration. I haven't put a formal request to adopt 19, but I wanted to consider it in light of 21 and 22.
I was considering, Mayor, but I'll go with your feelings of removing it from the agenda because you mentioned that at the Finance Committee meeting, because it was not a request to adopt, which is under our purview.
Understood.
So if it's all right with you, I will remove it from the agenda until which time as you send it to the committee. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
All right, then I'll do that under Finance. Thank
Great.
you.
And just to give a quick update on the matter of plan design changes, we will, city employees and member of collective bargaining units as well as retirees will receive a letter around April 1st that just notify of the plan design changes with open enrollment on April 17th. And those changes happen on July 1st. So that's the structural part of the plan design changes. The conversations with different units and part of the city employees continues.
Okay. Does that conclude? We have a question, looks like.
Yes, I'll just speak to the rest when it
Okay, I guess the Councilor Sarah had a question I saw.
Mayor LaChapelle, I've been eagerly following the statewide sales and of cannabis in the state, and I was wondering if the city has received any disbursements yet for excise tax.
Yes. We have received December 2018 to February 2019. It is just a little bit over $57,000 in revenue. It is extremely, every dollar counts, it is going to be extremely difficult to estimate going forward. And what you will see in the budget, very conservative number. There are just so many variables as far as new dispensaries opening, and where folks will be with it after the novelty, and maybe the novelty, maybe it'll increase. But that is, we have received the first portion. It's happened since the last city council meeting.
That's there.
And do you know when the next disbursement is scheduled for? Is it quarterly?
It seems to be quarterly right now, and I would expect it to say the same, but right now.
Thank you.
Okay, additional question, Councilor Kuzinski?
Status of the host agreement, monies that may be coming in?
The community impact fees.
Yeah.
So we have one that would become operational, and that's INSA, and after their first year of business, I believe it's 90. They have 90 days to submit that impact fee.
Okay. Additional questions to the mayor? Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. President, I move that the public hearings be open.
Second.
Motion second to open public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Councilor Rist.
The first item on the public hearing agenda is a $9,000 appropriation from the Community Preservation Act to assess the possibility of a dog park. The CPA unanimously approved this item. Parks are part of open space and recreation, and new parks and even renovation of old parks is a tenet of the CPA. It is common for the CPA to provide seed money so that designs can be done, because most of the grant funding for many of the projects require an adequate design to be submitted when you want to get a grant. So that's what this will do. This money will be to target locations and to look at design elements. The Finance Committee also requested that the consultant analyze maintenance needs, a concern that a volunteer group may not always be available for maintenance. So we wanted to see what type of maintenance might be required based on other dog parks that are available for the consultant to study. The Finance Committee was also wondering about the liability concerns to the city and the cost of that insurance analysis. That was also requested by the Finance Committee, all of which will be studied under the $9,000. It does not include a study of land procurement, but targeting current city-owned property. Councilor Zaret submitted this, and also our planner, Jeff Bagg, is here if you have any questions.
Okay, is there anyone?
It was approved 3-0 by the Finance Committee, sorry.
Is there anyone from the city who'd like to address Jeff or anyone else? No?
Go ahead,
Okay,
you said
then
yes.
go ahead, sure.
Good evening, thanks. I'm Jeff Bagg, I'm the city planner. I would just like to preface it a little bit more in terms of a context, which is that this $9,000 is an effort to prepare us to seek additional grants. So there's a Stanton Foundation grant program specifically for municipalities to create dog parks. And it's really broken down into two grant elements, which is a design grant and then a construction grant. And so what we found upon looking at this initially was that in order to be eligible for the design grant, we actually needed to do some pre-design work. And that's really what the focus of this $9,000 would do, would allow us to create a list of city-owned properties. And I think, as Councilor Zaret says, not just rule them in, but potentially rule out properties that may or may not make sense. The idea with the design grant from the Stanton Foundation is that you would have sort of a preferred site that you would then seek design for, and then presumably you would seek the construction grants after that. Here we haven't really had that robust discussion about what is that preferred site in Easthampton. So we're trying to get the CPA money to allow us that time with a consultant to explore a couple sites list pros and cons, look at access, parking, and the general feasibility of certain sites. And then we will look, hopefully through a series of at least 2 community meetings, to refine that to a preferred site. And then finally, the $9,000 will allow us to draw a schematic design and a rough construction estimate. And that's actually what is required to apply for the Stanton Foundation grant. So it's kind of the pre-design work that we really don't have the capacity to do in-house in the planning department. So
I apologize, I should have mentioned, my notes are very clear. The Stanton Foundation grant is a $25,000 grant for design funds that they will apply for once they get the site work that Jeff mentioned. And there's also a grant of $250,000 toward construction. So what I was referring to, leveraging grants, they're there. And that's what Jeff is referring to. Thank you.
thank you.
The only other thing to add to that, I think, is that the expense of the city here is 10% of the total construction cost. So if it's a $250,000 park, the city has to raise $25,000 to leverage all that other money that's available for the park. So it really is quite an opportunity that's available to the city at this time.
Okay. Anyone else, public, would like to address the council concerning this appropriation? Just go to the podium, state your name and address, please.
Hi, Lindsay Mailer, 10 Mutter Street. I'm a new resident to Easthampton, and I have 2 amazing hyperactive puppies, and I am in complete support of this. Right now I travel to Northampton, Westfield, Holyoke, or Granby, who all have fenced-in dog parks, with the exception of Northampton that is open. So I think I've already written a letter to Owen, and I don't know if it's been read in at any of these meetings, but I'm fully in support of this. I think it's a great aspect to bring to a community where people can come together. It ends a lot of stigma against particularly my breed of dogs, where they can come together and show their playfulness, and it also gives opportunity for adults to connect. And I'm happy to put a fence in my backyard and bring all the puppies there if we need to. But I am in support of this project. And I know I've thought about it too, that there's the question of who's going to be responsible for this space. And I had talked to Owen a bit in discussion of what about building a committee or a board like they have for the Manhattan Rail Trail. I know I myself would be happy to volunteer and scoop poop or do whatever needs to happen to keep a smaller space clean, just like we do cleanup day in the city as well. So I can't speak for everyone else, but I would be happy to join a board to help facilitate a space for my pups to go be with other pups. So just wanted to get that there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else from the community? Please come up and just state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Riley Hernandez. I live at 58 Holyoke Street. In addition, I think there's a huge benefit for non-dog owning residents in Easthampton, because I'm sure, as some of you have seen, at Nonotuck Park, many dog owning residents do go there and take their dogs off leash. Now, we have no knowledge of who has experienced some sort of trauma to dogs, so I think that by providing a space where dogs can safely be off leash, it'll enrich the experience of never spoken like in front of him. It'll enrich the experience of non-dog owning residents at the existing parks in Easthampton. Further, I think there's an economic benefit that might be possible. There are, I think, 5 dog-friendly bars in Easthampton: Fort Hill, Brass Cat, 413, New City, and Abandoned Building. If the dog park attracts people from other cities to come in, there's a very likely possibility that they then stop at one of these bars or restaurants to grab a drink after, hanging out with their dogs. So I think there's an economic benefit, and I think that there's a possibility that it can enrich the experience of non-dog owning residents as well.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else would like to address the council concerning the dog park? Okay, Councilor Rist.
I move that the full council approve the following appropriation. The amount requested is $9,000 to be appropriated from the CPA Reserve for Open Space account, $9,000 to be appropriated to the dog park account, $9,000. The amount requested be used for the following purpose: for preliminary design work, site selection, schematic design, and cost estimates for creation of a dog park.
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second, additional questions or comments? Council Kwasinski, did you?
Well, I had hoped to call Planner Bag to the podium just for one quick question, but we have a motion on the table.
Is it critical?
Is-
I will remove the motion if the second will be removed.
second.
Okay, so, there we go, he heard you.
I think it's important that the city consider all sites, and I know in our property meetings that we had discussed several sites, and there seemed to be one site that we didn't seem to gather a lot of steam, but I think should be included in the examination, and that is Nonotuck Park. And I just wanted to be clear about that, and I know it sounds like we're doing a broad study, both to rule in and out, but I wanted to be clear, if you thought that wasn't to be the case, I would amend the motion on the table to include that. So my question is, will Nonotuck Park be one of the sites that will be reviewed?
I think the short answer is yes. The longer explanation is that Nonotuck Park, generally speaking, is governed by the Parks Commission. So it's an existing standing committee of the city. So that commission has been aware of the discussion of dog park and had I don't know exactly how it was put on an agenda, but they had a discussion and voted to not have the dog park be at Nonotuck. So what we did not do is do any exploration of Nonotuck Park in terms of its suitability. So the Parks Commission has, I think, clearly articulated their position.
I understand.
But in terms of publicly looking at it and its benefits or cons, we have not had that vetted. So I think, I don't know who has that authority to have that property on the list. It would make
In terms of putting the
sense.
property on the list and doing a vetting of the property, both pro and con, I think is appropriate for our community as a whole. The decision-making process will leave to the decision-making process.
Sure, and I would defer to there's Jim Ramsey is a member of the Parks Commission who is here, and I don't know if the council would be interested in learning a little bit more about that, but.
Yeah, sure. But,
6:30, I'm trying to do both.
do you have 4 minutes or 2 minutes, Mr. Ramsey? Yeah, if you could just come to the podium, that'd be great.
Jeff Nolan speaking well. Jim Ramsey, Easthampton.
Member of the park.
Park and Rec Commissioner, Board of Registrars.
And what is your opinion on the Parks?
Well, having it at the park. The cons, you're having a nice grilling, and there's a dog park, and the dog gets loose. There's going to be a dog. It's access too. Access. The park closes in October. You want to get to a dog park. The dog park wouldn't be up this end. I mean, there's no real. It's space. It's parking. When it's cookout season, it's all full up pretty much out there. Parking's. The pool's busy. It's just not a good mix if you're trying to. Dogs, put them in a dog park and there's nice stuff going on that grill. It's probably not a good mix. Whereas a safe area of fenced in access, it's all about access. And then that's why the commission was against the putting it in the park. It's access and a little bit away from that many people.
Okay, Councilor Riss, did you have a question?
Jim, would you be opposed, though? The consultant may look at it, and only for the purposes of listening to you, maybe to rule it out for these reasons, but also to find the pros of putting it there, looking at what we could do to mitigate these concerns. I believe the Park and Rec Commission does have the last decision-making power. However, the consultant, if everything comes to pass and people really want to try it, I think at least by having that consultant give you an opinion, it may be a chance for you to reconsider. But that isn't, nothing is being finalized. But I think what Counselor Kwasinski is saying is, let's look at it, and a consultant will at least ask the Park and Rec Commission and get all their concerns, and then study the whole matter. I hope you'd be open to that, at least, even if, in the end, you're not convinced, okay?
And I do know that there's more coming into the park right now. There's pickleball. It's
Yes, we saw that.
Yes, that's coming. And that's a big league for the, I mean, it's a big draw.
Okay.
So, I
Okay,
mean,
Counselor Zaret?
I mean, I would just echo what's been said here, and to Mr. Ramsey, who I know, I mean, it's probably, I'm sure it's difficult for you being an advocate for this project as well as being on the Parks Commission and seeing it both ways. I actually kind of appreciate that you sound to be that you can be unbiased about this. I do think what seems to be kind of my mantra here is that this initial early study is valuable to both rule in and rule out, and especially as it pertains to Nonotuck Park. For now, the Parks Commission is dealing with more of a conceptual idea than something more concrete. And I think at least allowing plans to be drawn up, it at least lets you have maybe able to make an informed decision, as it does for some of the other properties that have come up where there's been some public concern. So I think that we should leave no stone or blade of grass unturned, but definitely scoop the poop on that grass. And again, the point of this study and early design is not to put a shovel in the ground, it's to determine where the shovel could go in the ground.
and
so,
it's the 9,000 to come up with the plans.
correct, but multiple plans from multiple locations and be able to have you say, okay, I see this now, and maybe it will work, or this doesn't work, or so that's, and I mean, I think that clearly this is going to enrich our community. Something I just really want to quickly add, I know you have to make it to a meeting, but
I let them know that I was trying to do both.
so I did get some feedback that people are concerned, oh, you're spending all this money in CPA funds, and meanwhile our roads are in disrepair, and et cetera, and so forth. But I would never, ever, ever commit or ask for city funds if I knew it took away from some other element of our municipality. And unfortunately, in this case, the purpose of the CPA is to provide money exactly for causes like this, community enrichment. Fortunately, would that I could ask for CPA funds to fix our sidewalks and potholes and such. I would, but that's not the role of this money. So I just want to make it clear to everyone in the public that we can do, it's not an either or, it's a both potentially, and that the funds come from different sources. So that's all I'll say. And I also wanted to thank Jim for all his help so far on this project, as well as Planner Bag and Assistant Planner Webb and everyone else who's spoken tonight. So,
Okay, Counselor Peak, you had?
I had a question, I guess for Counselor Rist, which is, does the motion that was on the floor include a specific list of properties? So we're not, like, this discussion is helpful, but we're not actually, there's no language for us to actually amend here.
No, and it would be inappropriate to do so because the money is being set to find a site. To list sites that we don't want or to list sites that we do want, I think would be very inappropriate. First of all, because if we get an appropriation in the future from the CPA to build a dog park at a specific site, we're going to have an informed design to make that decision over. So I appreciate everybody's concerns about the park or wherever it's going. We really are at the very beginning of the design phase on this, and we're looking at what the consultant will tell us. But I agree with Councilor Kwasinski, let's not eliminate Nonotuck Park right at the beginning. We need to see if it's possible, and maybe have a chance to convince the Park and Rec Commission that it's possible, but we need information, so.
Or
that's
also
all
to
I'll
have
say.
the public understand the reasons for and against the park. And I think it's an important.
But to me, though, like, I want to get back on, I mean, this discussion
Ready to
is
vote.
good, but I mean, we're just trying to say,
Well,
should we
I think it was
spend-
important to have the planner and everyone
Yeah.
understand the council's will on the subject.
That's fine.
Right. But so getting back, so again, as I think Councilor Peak alluded to, I think the meat of the question is here, do we want to approve the $9,000 for the schematic design with no sites being excluded or included at this point? So I'll again entertain a motion because oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
wants to say something.
And I appreciate the clarification of what's being considered tonight by the full council, and speak really to the issue after our park commissioner spoke up, and I thank you for thoughtfulness. I will say on the behalf of the Park and Rec department and the commission, they work very closely together to maximize every single dollar that they're given by the city, but also fees to access the parks. I would ask that the consultant and this body take into account not just use or not use of Nonotuck Park, but also impact, as well as access year-round. I would be concerned. Park and Rec and the commissioners have some pretty weighty decisions coming at them in the next couple of years, including 11 acres on the side of Mount Tom, and how that will be included or not included in Park and Rec, as well as maintenance issues that, of course, we're always addressing, as well as a pool that is on the last leg. Why I mention this is a dog park within our parks department or piece of property, I would fear would go to the raising of fees. And I think that the access to our parks is important and it's affordable, and I would like that to continue. And I have a great deal of respect for the commission and also the department, and would want a full accounting from that department of the impact, both direct and indirect, on staffing, and special considerations for grass and seed if there is a dog park. I think that there are costs above and beyond if it goes into or onto a park property.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'll entertain I guess a motion again for this.
Are we sure?
I think so.
All right. Request is hereby made for the approval of the following appropriation. Amount requested is $9,000 to be appropriated from the CPA Reserve for Open Space, $9,000 to be appropriated to the dog park account, $9,000 for the following purpose: preliminary design work, site selection, schematic design, and cost estimates for the creation of a dog park.
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second to approve the supplemental appropriation of $9,000 for the site selection, schematic design, cost estimates for the dog park. Additional questions or comments? Councilor Rist.
I just wanted to comment to the fact that the CPA cannot fund road repair. And what the CPA, as Councilor Zaret mentioned, it talks about community preservation. But the other half of it, when we talk about parks especially, the Manhattan Rail Trail, the old town hall renovation, it's about improving the quality of life in our beautiful city. And that's what the CPA does for us. It's why I am so a big defender of its use for our city. And besides that, if we wanted to fix just one road, it would empty the CPA's coffers. So I'm sorry, but it's just not available.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Okay, the next appropriation request is dear to my heart because it deals with affordable housing. Wrote some notes. We are being asked for $15,950. Again, this is seed money to look at the ability of the city to repair for capital improvement, things like a new roof, et cetera, to 5 of the homes that we currently are currently managed by the Southern Middlesex Opportunity Council, or SMOC. The planning department is the primary supervisor of this particular funding. There are 5 homes that have to be assessed, 4 of which are owned by SMOC. 1 is managed by SMOC and is the last home, according to this report, the town lodging house that's owned by a city of this nature in the state. It is common for the CPA to invest in privately owned affordable housing that is deed restricted. And it's very important to note, as it was informed to the Finance Committee, if funding is eventually appropriated to repair these homes that the capital investment money targets, some home needs a new roof, those homes owned by SMOC would have to have a deed restriction applied to them. And I don't forget, is it 100 years or in perpetuity? 100 years at least. So that deed restriction would be required so that it would be for affordable housing. I wanted to read to you, these 5 homes do, without them, I personally feel we would have the homeless problem over communities that other communities face today. They are recovery-focused, supportive, permanent housing for co-ed. That's the one on Adams Street. Recovery-focused, supportive, permanent housing for male veterans. That's the Vikings Landing. 250 Main Street, recovery-focused, supportive, permanent housing for co-ed again. Right Home for Women, 305 Main Street, recovery-focused, supportive, permanent housing for women. In our own town lodging house, again, formerly the Easthampton Poor Farm, I'm glad we don't name it that way anymore, operated lodging in Commonwealth as again for co-ed housing. A lot of these units, I think that totals to something like 60, 70 units, are available and help us keep affordable housing available. I hope I don't mispronounce her name. Jana Tatro is here from the Housing Authority, or Housing Partnership. She is the one who, in city.
If I could speak to the issue first.
No, I wanted her first. No.
It's spring, Councilor Rist. It's smiles. I attended the first consideration at subcommittee level of this proposal. Again, Affordable Housing Partnership, I would commend their work. Dollars for affordable housing, especially for a city our size, is very hard fought. When we talk to developers that would put together properties like this, we are often passed over because of the limited amount of land or units, and it is easier to scale up economy of these developments in support of housing. And this is a very unique opportunity to also improve the neighborhoods these homes exist in, and to take a look at exactly what they need on not only quality of living, but also environmentally. And we have a strong commitment to the green community. I would say that this city historically has targeted money both in grants but also in their budget to support housing of all types. Our most recent example was over at 1 Ferry Street, where we specifically targeted our Mass Works grant, as well as created a district improvement finance tool. And that was to, of course, some market rate, but also to workforce development. We also have used funds across the street at 15 Cottage. So I will let Janet go into details, but I cannot express enough support for the investigations to improve these housing units for the populations they serve. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jana Tatro. I'm the chair of the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. I live at 52 Pomeroy Street. So I think what I just wanted to talk about is a little bit why we care about this project, why the Housing Partnership and the Planning Department have put it forth. The Town Lodging House has been a property that's been on the radar for the Housing Partnership for several years. We know that there are some maintenance needs at that property, and as was mentioned, it is owned by the city. All 5 of these properties serve some of our most vulnerable residents in Easthampton, and arguably in our region. A lot of folks that live in these units, these are single room occupancy units. So these are units that, for the most part, have shared kitchens and bathrooms and living space, and then people have their own individual bedrooms. And a lot of folks who are living in these properties are coming directly out of our shelter system. So they're leaving shelter to make space for other people moving into these units. They do all have a supportive housing component, so they have case management. For some folks, this is where they will stay for a long time, and for some folks, this is really a transition to move on to other permanent housing. So the Housing Partnership really feels strongly that these are really important units for us to maintain in the city. We started this project really looking at Town Lodging House, but after talking to SMOC, South Middlesex Opportunity Council, it's actually, their agency is actually from Framingham, so they do a lot of work in Middlesex County, and then they do some work in Worcester County, and then a little bit out here in Hampshire and Hampton County. And they do a lot of different kinds of housing, but they do this sort of supportive housing. And, you know, quite honestly, we're fairly lucky that they're willing to manage the town lodging property for us. Basically, we give them the property and they do all of the maintenance and the work, which would be really challenging for the city of Easthampton to do on its own. So what this proposal does is allows us to look at all 5 of the properties to get a sense of what their capital needs are. So we're not talking about, you know, painting or patching walls. SMOC has their own maintenance team for that, but what we're looking at is roofs or heating systems. Town Lodging House, there's a back porch that I think is in need of some repair, and it will allow the city to be more ready should other funding sources come available for us to apply for. So there was some funding available in the fall for some capital improvements for affordable housing, and we weren't ready to apply because we really didn't know what we needed. And so this $15,950 will allow us to have a really good idea of what's needed. There is no expectation that all of the properties need major capital needs, or that the city is going to take care of everybody's major needs, but it helps forge a better partnership with SMOC on these properties and allows us to kind of get a better sense of where we're at. And I think the last thing I'll just say, which I've said, I think Councilor Rist has now heard this 3 times, is that I'm really proud of our Easthampton's commitment to affordable housing. And I think if you look at some of the communities around us, we should be really proud of what we've done. We've done a lot of great housing. We're at 7-ish%, which for a city of our size is really great. And this, to me, is just another way for us to show that we care and that we want to preserve these units. Again, they do serve really vulnerable people that rely on these properties as a place to live. We've seen this type of housing, this sort of SRO, single room occupancy housing, disappearing in our other neighboring communities. Northampton's had a couple of properties that were torn down and that were replaced by other quality housing, but this is a very, this kind of units are really unique, and when they're gone, they're gone. And so I just would urge council to consider the proposal, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions for
I'd like to make a comment. Janet, you came to our meeting in the Finance Committee. You are a terrific spokesperson for the Housing Partnership. I think you did a terrific job. It helped me to certainly understand the importance of our partnership with SMOC, and also the importance of getting a handle on the building needs across this segment of our housing stock. So I'm going to be certainly in support.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Riss.
I just wanted to, I forgot to mention this, but I believe the SMOC person who, I think you said that they have no problem with a deed restriction moving forward. They would be happy to do the deed restriction.
I mean,
especially since it gives them the cash. So.
Right, so if properties needed capital needs and CPA invested more money, or I presumably any other state funding source that we might access, then there would be a deed restriction. Some of the units are already counted on our subsidized housing inventory and some aren't. And there's ways for us to include those if they had the deed restriction. And SMOC is a nonprofit housing developer, so this is their business anyway. So we're not convincing them.
I just want the council to know. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional, Councilor Lynch?
Growing up in Easthampton, I had some friends that lived at the Town Lodging House on Oliver Street, and I firsthand saw the benefits that they received from the staff and the conditions there in the house, and I definitely think it's something we need to support and continue as a community. I definitely see the benefits. I was a little hesitant at first about taking CPA funds for a privately owned house, the other 4 elements, but the partnership with SMOC and everything and how they manage our facility there, do the maintenance there and the painting of the walls and the other surface maintenance, if you will, the cosmetic side of it. I definitely think we as a council need to support this, and as a community need to support it, because it really gets us to that next level of being that better neighbor. community. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? Questions? Okay, thank you. Just a minute. Thank you. So we're all set with you. Thank you very much. So anyone from the public would like to come up if you want to comment to this appropriation?
Thank you. I'm all in favor of this proposal. I am a resident of a smock house for more than 4 years now. And I'm John Frost from 250 Main Street. The one thing I think the council might want to consider on a more urgent basis is making the smock housing units handicap accessible. As far as a ramp, or something. There's nothing at the three houses actually that I've lived at. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Councilor Riss.
Can I talk to Jeff or Jana again? Because that's a huge point, and I wanted to ask you a question if I would. If we go with renovations, does ADA requirements, because we're renovating a public housing, require accessibility be done? Does Jamie know?
There's a dollar threshold related to the property the value of the property, which once that dollar threshold is crossed, it triggers ADA improvements.
Do you know what that is?
It changes for each property, so it's a percentage.
Dollar.
I don't know what the percent amount is, but that is something that we are aware of. And it doesn't matter if the construction happens all at once or over the course of a number of years. Once that those capital improvements have been, that threshold's been reached, we have to go for full ADA. I will say that this study for the capital needs will be looking at handicap accessibility at each of those at each of the properties. So that will be included in the final report as to what each property needs and what kinds of ballpark cost to get to that next level of accessibility.
John, Dana, and Tara, Dana.
You're getting better.
I don't know why. I assume the housing partnership would not be opposed to making these sites, whether required or not, accessible.
Right, absolutely not. Right.
That's all I want to take.
Yeah.
Okay, and did I see your hand up, Councilor Collins? No.
No, I.
Just writing. Oh, okay. Okay.
I got
anyone
my answer.
Okay. Anyone else from the public who would like to address, or Jamie, did you want to say anything, or was that it?
I just want to reiterate that this money.
You can come a little closer.
Sorry. I just want to reiterate that this money will definitely help us down the road with future grant applications. As stated previously, with there are a lot of grants that require full designs, or at least they don't want to fund a fishing expedition for what might be going on. So this money will allow us to specifically target housing choice grants that will be eligible for next year, the year after. I don't know when we're eligible again. Community Development Block Grant funding can be used for these types of projects. And then, of course, CPA money is always available, but as a hopefully just a match.
Great, thank you. Anyone else from the public or city, for the matter, like to address the council on this appropriation? Okay, Councilor Riss, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the full council approve the following appropriation. Amount requested is $15,950 to be appropriated from the CPA Reserve for Affordable Housing account. $15,950 to be appropriated to single-room occupancy housing capital needs assessments. $15,950 for the following purpose: for funding to conduct capital needs assessments at each of the 5 single-room occupancy housing properties in the city.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the supplemental appropriation of $15,950. Again, as just mentioned, for the capital needs assessment of the 5 SRO housing properties. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. That concludes from your perspective, Councilor Riss, is that right?
Thank you, yes. It's not me now, it's...
Councilor Peak?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. This is my first public hearing. So, yeah, what we're looking at tonight is taking a motion to establish a municipal light plant. And just to give a little bit of context of what's going on here, last summer, this body voted to establish a telecommunications advisory committee. And the purpose of that committee is to explore the state of Easthampton's internet options and what might be done to improve that access, which in addition to being a public, an issue of a lot of public interest, is also, there's a lot of economic development potential involved in that. So the Telecom Advisory Committee studied this issue, and basically what they found is that a lot of our peer communities are moving in that general direction of, moving in the general direction of establishing their own, like, fiber optic networks and providing internet municipally. And that while there's a lot of work to be done before Easthampton were to make a decision about whether or not that would be a good idea, the committee wrote a letter to this body and to the mayor, advising that we start taking sort of the steps, the regulatory steps that we would need to do to be able to do that sort of thing if we ended up deciding that that was the right way to go. The big regulatory thing that we have to do, if we want to do that, is to establish what they call a municipal light plan. And all that really is it's just if we designate ourselves as an MLP, or as they colloquially are referred to, a muni, then that gives the city the authority to put things up on the poles if we so desire. So if we looked over the bond, whatever the financing was, and we talked to vendors and we decided that, you know what, this is actually something that we really need for Easthampton, we would have the authority to go to Verizon and Eversource, who own most of the poles in town, and say, oh, hey, I need you to move these wires so that we can actually put up our own fiber and connect it to homes and get that up and running. Doing this under state law requires 2 votes of the city council in 2 separate fiscal years. And then, because we're a city and not a town, it actually requires the ratification of the voters. I imagine that this summer, I'd like to have a more robust discussion about whether this is something we want to ask the voters to consider in the upcoming municipal election in November. But unless we take this vote tonight, that's not even a conversation that we can have, because we'll have to wait an additional 2 years or hold a special election to even have that discussion. So our feeling was taking this vote tonight doesn't obligate the city to do anything. Even if we take these 2 votes and then the voters vote to approve this, that still doesn't obligate the city to do anything. But it does give us the legal authority to do something that I personally believe at some point down the line we are going to have to do. If we don't move, if we don't in one way or another move in a direction of having the sort of internet that Westfield is getting, that South Hadley is moving towards, that a bunch of the hill towns with some grant money are moving towards, then we could end up in a situation where we are among the slower communities, the communities with the worst internet in the Pioneer Valley. And I think that anyone who's just takes a second to take account of how important connectivity is for individuals and for businesses can see that that has real economic development ramifications in terms of attracting businesses and attracting homeowners. So that's, I think, the gist of what is going on here. It doesn't obligate us to anything and it doesn't cost anything, but if we want to do this in the next 2 or 3 years, then we need to take a vote this fiscal year, and we've only got a couple of months before that ends.
Okay, Councilor Rist.
I just want to say thank you to Councilor Peak. At our meeting, I was very reluctant on this. I said, how are we gonna pay for this if we're gonna do it? We have to bond it. But what I was informed about, using Westfield as the example, is that if we were to get into the business of providing internet service to our community, that's like our enterprise water fund. It's user fee supported. So the businesses and the individual homes that get this fast internet would be paying for it through the city agency, and the city, which may need to bond to build it, obviously that money's got to come from someplace, will be able to pay it off. And obviously, if we were going to move that way after the voters said yes, we would have to have a study done, what's the cost going to be, and that I'm sure the committee will look at. But I was enthusiastic about it once I learned that it's a business that we could get into, and the economic side of it is real. We have businesses in town that rely, and every business now relies on internet service to provide for their customers. And if we're slower than a neighboring community, even like Southampton or some other community, we are doing our economic development a disservice. So I'm very much in favor of this. The other thing they're going to have to sell is that, no, we're not building an electric power plant. Because people are going to wonder, why is it called a municipal light plant?
That's right.
And it's going to be, that's a sell for the committee after we decide to put it on the road tab.
Councilor Zara?
Actually, so I just want to say, first of all, I agree with everything that Councilor Riss said, so I don't need to repeat that. So ditto. And thank you for your vision, because as people come into the city, especially with all our mill spaces and the renovation or the creation now of the space at One Ferry, and just private residential use, as we continue to enrich this community and want to attract people here, and we build all these other amenities, it's no good if you have basically inept internet service or spotty internet service. So thank you for that vision. But what I did want to actually ask, to kind of piggyback off of what you finished with, Councilor Riss, was that what else potentially does establishing a municipal light plan entitle us to? So here we're talking about fiber optic broadband, but does that open us up to other opportunities in the future if we so wish to pursue them?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, MLPs in other communities provide electricity to residents. They provide gas to residents. And right now, looking at the sort of structure of Easthampton's government and the incumbent providers and the incumbent providers' infrastructure, I don't necessarily see that as something that I could see like a clear way to get into as easily as there's internet providers in town, but there's nothing in town even close to what Westfield is providing to their citizens. It just leaves everything we have in the dust. If we decide to get into the electricity business or the gas business, that wouldn't necessarily be the case, just because of the structures of those markets. But obviously there's no reason to necessarily say I swear we will never do any of those things. I don't know what the Easthampton's going to look like in 20, 30, 50 years. It could be that at some point that's a thing that we want to look into. But right now, we've really only thought about this for the purpose of establishing a broadband.
Okay. Is there anyone from either the city or the public who'd like to address the council on this vote? Okay. Councilor, I'll entertain a motion then.
Great. Sorry, I forgot to print this out. I move that the City Council authorize the City of Easthampton to take all necessary and appropriate action to establish and to maintain, in accordance with the provision of Chapter 164 of the General Laws and in accordance with the rules, regulations, and orders of the Department of Public Utilities and the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, a municipal light plant for the purposes for all purposes allowable under the laws of the Commonwealth, including without limitation the operation of a telecommunications system and any related services, or to take any other action relative thereto.
Second. Yeah, motion and a second to approve the previous read motion related to MGL 164, Section 35, related to municipal light plan. Additional questions or comments? Councilor Derby.
I just want to say thanks to Councilor Peak. I think that what Councilor Zarrett brought up is a really interesting point. We do own our streetlights. So that's, you know, there's something to be said there. And we also have, you know, solar capability on city land. You know, so I think that there are exciting possibilities into the future as things kind of adapt and change to aggregate possibly, you know, some of that infrastructure. And I think that, not to muddle it, but I think that this particular one is critical because, you know, people that might want to spend more time with their families and telecommute to work, I think this could be a potential huge win for those people that need that capability and currently are struggling to meet the data requirements. So I think this is great. So thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
Sorry, was that too
No
loud?
bad. Okay. I'll entertain
I was enthusiastic. Close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second, close public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, getting back to standing committees. Finance, Councilor Rist.
Yes, I'd like to do a little cleanup. As the mayor has indicated, I'd like to request, first of all, it was wrong to place this on the agenda. There was never a request to adopt 32B, Section 19. It was merely that the mayor was going to consider it, and I placed it on the agenda in haste. And at the mayor's request, I therefore move to remove Chapter 32B, Section 19 from the Finance Committee agenda without prejudice.
Second. Motion is second to move without prejudice, MGL Chapter 32B, Section 19. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
And we learned that there are going to be further discussions on 21 and 22 and/or 150E negotiations in the collective bargaining with our collective bargaining units. Now I would like to bring up the matter of the local room occupancy tax. The first thing I was going to ask the council, well, first I'm going to request, and I'm not going to make a motion yet, but I would like the council to consider, although we don't have to, a public hearing for the adoption of this tax. We rarely have, in all our history of the city, adopted a new tax. And I think it's appropriate to let the public weigh in on it if they would choose to. So I'd like the council to do that. And as part of the motion, the mayor is requesting tonight, and the finance committee failed, it's my fault for not realizing it, to adopt a percentage. We can adopt up to 6% of an excise tax on local room occupancy. But I'm going to request that the council, as part of the motion to set the public hearing, adopt a 3%. And this is primarily to allow us to tax short-term rentals, local Airbnbs, and to put us in an equal footing with those communities that have hotels and motels, which we do not have. I'll let the mayor or the finance director improve on my discussion of it, but I would like that. I think the finance committee did move 3-0 to approve it. We just didn't set a tax. We could do 6%, but I believe the mayor is in favor of not going too far too soon with it, because we still want to attract Airbnbs. But for the most part, when you rent a room, they're part of it. We just don't do it in this city. You do get these taxes everywhere you go, so. Does the mayor want to say anything, or the finance director? I don't know, as to why we would like to do this.
I think you captured the reason and argument of why I think we should do this. I think that there is a careful balance with a tax like this. There's impact on our public infrastructure, but on the other hand, there are residents who do and may want to augment their income and quality of life by doing Airbnb. I think that 3% with the newness of this is appropriate, where it may, I think it'll continue to encourage folks to do Airbnb, which helps people stay in our community rather than going to a hotel. And for those who do it, not too burdensome to add to their actual costs of doing Airbnb. So that's my.
She said it better.
Thank Council Peak. Do you have a question?
Mayor LaChapelle, I know that there are some deadlines associated with getting this passed for it to be in effect by a certain date. Would a 2-week delay cause an issue?
I didn't think of that.
I do not know.
Barb, no?
No.
Barb
I
doesn't
you
think
have-
so.
You have to vote at least 30 days before, yeah.
30
No, I
days
don't-
before
I don't
what?
think it makes a difference.
Melissa? Okay. Such a good question, Councilor Peak. Thank you.
I just feel, Mr. President.
Councilor, I saw Councilor Kozinski
All
first.
right, he's
Kozinski.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
with regard to the 3% versus 6%, with 6% being the amount that is the maximum,
Yes.
of course, the folks who own the property aren't paying the tax. They're not being taxed. It is the user of the short-term rental that pays the tax. Like when we go on vacation somewhere, we pay a room tax or an occupancy tax. So it's not really a tax on our citizens for the most part. I don't see too many people renting a place in their own community that they want to pay a tax.
They want to get away.
Yeah, to get away. But my question in raising that is, what leads us to conclude that we would be,
I got it.
what leads us to conclude that we would be turning people away by going to 6% rather than 3%? When I book a site somewhere and I go away, you pay the tax because that's what it is, and you don't really start looking for other places based on whether it's a 3% tax or 6% or 5%, or you just book it.
So to your first point around why 3 rather than 6, I think that the marketing of Airbnb units and like apps are very competitive. And while our residents may not pay for it, the tax itself, I do think that they might suffer an unintended consequence of not having the occupancy that they would want. There are some detriments to, renting or doing an Airbnb in Easthampton compared to other communities that may have amenities that are easier to access, whether that be, pending on you want an Airbnb close to a dog park, and Northampton has one, and Easthampton doesn't. Just as an example. So I would just, I've read about this, and the rates are really competitive, and there are cleaning fees on top of it, and some changes in it. So I think it would make, it's a signal that we are a little more friendly to such population coming in and out, and also provides us some revenue. As to residents actually renting or using something in our city, I don't know how many times that would happen, but I don't think it's impossible, and I think it's more probable as people are improving their homes or, for instance, taking another Airbnb spot because their house is more amenable to someone in their family or a friend that needs a space or accessibility.
Okay, I saw Councilor, and then I'll get back to Councilor.
I just wanted to answer the question at the time. Thank you, Barbara, for giving us.
Oh, yeah.
The effective date of local excise, this is from the MGL 64G. The local excise takes effect on the first day of the first calendar quarter following 30 days after the acceptance by a city or town of the provisions of MGL Chapter 64G 3A, or on the first day of such later calendar quarter as the city or town may designate when it accepts the provision.
Sounds like
So let's say it's May, I actually have a date. We need an acceptance vote by May 31st
By May
of this year.
31st.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you
So waiting
to our
2 weeks
finance
won't
director.
hurt. Waiting 2 weeks won't hurt.
Council Lynch?
All right, so I just wanted to, I had looked up some Airbnb prices, and it's about average $50 a night, for a room. And if you do 3% of $50, it's about $1.50, and 6% would be about $3. So I mean, we're not talking tons of money here. That I think, I was under the impression when I voted for this that it was at the 6%, because that was the only verbiage on the note. So I think the 6%, I don't think is going to be that detrimental to somebody renting. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
And again, let's not lose, all we're talking about now is really setting a public hearing for this, as far as there will
Sure.
be time for this discussion, so let's
There was an
not
amendment
use
to
too
it.
much of it for this.
Except I think we should advertise what the percentage is, so I think the
Yeah.
council should vote this evening what that percentage is.
That's what I thought we talked
Oh, I don't think so.
Counselor,
Why
is there-
Well, I was going to say that I think this discussion is one that should be undertaken on the subcommittee level, not at the council level. Maybe return with an opinion to the council. It just seems.
I'm happy to do that.
It just makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And then to Councilor Lynch's comment, I think I don't disagree with you for a few days, but I am aware of some Airbnbs in town where they're basically rented out on a monthly basis, so it could add up. And I don't agree or disagree at this point with any specific percentage, but I do feel like that should be discussed at the finance subcommittee level.
Yeah. Counselor Peak, do you have anything more to add?
Oh, I was just basically going to say the same thing, that maybe we should just, yeah.
Okay. So, Counselor Rich, you make a motion to
I'm just gonna make
continue
a
the public hearing
motion
then?
to, we don't have a public hearing. I'm gonna make a
Oh, right.
motion that we set a public hearing for the next meeting in these chambers at 6:15 for the adoption of MGL Chapter 64G, Section 3A, local room occupancy excise tax.
Second.
Okay, so a motion to set a public hearing for the excise for the, I lost it, the local room occupancy tax for April 3rd, 6:15 PM at these chambers. Additional questions, Counselor?
Just would like to thank Counselor Rist for making this a public hearing issue. I think that's really important, because since it is a tax, rather than just voted in council this evening. I think that, good move. Thank you very much.
Additional questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes, so the public hearing is set.
So, yes, the Finance Committee will continue to debate the excise tax and make a recommendation on the percentage at our next meeting, which is the 27th at 5 o'clock. I would also like to move to the Finance Committee, where is it? The request from the mayor to amend our ordinances in the new pay plan as reported by the Collins report in exhibits A and B as submitted to the council to the Finance Committee for review.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move to finance for review the Collins Center report, Plan A and B. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
That concludes.
That concludes. Okay, public safety, Counselor Gomez.
No report tonight, Mr. President.
Okay. Appointments, Counselor Connor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We met this evening prior to the city council meeting, and we had 5 separate appointments to approve. I will now go through. The first one, these are out of order from our agenda. The first one was for Amy Petrowski for the Board of Health with the term expiration of 12/31/2021. That passed 3-0. Just a little background on Amy. She moved here 5 years ago from Northampton. Originally from a town south of Boston, she attended Smith. She's been in the public health arena in one way or another since 2008. She is the current health agent for East Long Meadow, and she has spent all of her career doing inspections and making policy and providing education to other cities and towns and other residents of those towns, and never in the city where she lived and where she's raising her family. So this opportunity to have an impact on this community is really important to her. And for that reason, I think the committee voted 3-0 to approve her. And I will now make a motion to approve Amy Petrowski to the Board of Health with a term expiration December 31, 2021.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Amy Petrowski, Board of Health, term expiration 12/31/2021. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
No, it just stands on the thing. So.
I get them all.
All right.
Lucky me.
The next one is Eric Poulin for the Parks and Rec Commission with the term expiration December 31st, 2021. Just a couple of notes on Eric. He has lived in this community his whole life. He grew up basically at the park, is what he told me. He said he's been on a bunch of different sports teams. He spent his entire childhood at the park. He's also worked for the Parks and Rec from the age of 14 through graduate school. He's happy to see the expansion of events like the concerts that are held in the park. And this is almost a direct quote, that he wants to give back to the community for all the joy that the parks have given to him, and he wants to be able to keep them a place of joy for others in the future.
Hear, hear.
And it was awesome. We voted 3-0 to approve Eric. I will now make a motion to approve Eric Poulin to the Parks and Rec Commission with a term expiration December 31, 2021.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion for Eric Poulin, Parks and Rec Department, term expiration 12/30/2021. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Okay, then we had an appointment for Stan McCoy, the licensing board, with a term expiration of June 5th, 2024. Wow, that seems like a long way away. So we had a discussion around Stan. Stan is deeply committed to this community. He spends a lot of energy and time with this community. He is currently on the chair. He's the chair of the Board of Public Works. He did an outstanding job with that committee. And I know that he will be outstanding for the licensing board. I think there's going to be a little bit of overlap as he transitions his duties from the Department of Public Works. But we also voted 2-0 with one abstention to approve Stan McCoy. So I will make a motion to approve Stan to the licensing board with an expiration date of June 5th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to appoint Stanley McCoy to the licensing board with the expiration date of June 5th, 2024. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
One.
Okay, motion passes.
Why? Well, what's that word you used, Owen? Proximity?
Oh, proximity.
Yeah, I love that.
Because of your proximity.
Proximity to Stan.
So the last two generated an enormous amount of conversation. These appointments are for the city clerk and the assistant city clerk. Barbara LeBombard for city clerk, expiration of March 31st, 2022. Mary Ann Giza, assistant city clerk, with the term expiration of March 31st, 2022. Barbara has been the city clerk for 35 years and has done an outstanding job. We were commenting, and she does not want us to say anything nice about her, but too bad. We were commenting in the meeting that she's always very, very willing to help us out and has the answers that we need when we go into her office to ask questions. So we appreciate the work that she's doing and wholeheartedly approved her appointment in the subcommittee 3-0, as well as Mary Ann Giza, who also works very hard in the city clerk's office and has done a phenomenal job helping us out here on the city council when Barbara is not available. So I will now make a motion, unless there's any.
I'll just do it at the
I know
motion.
you'd like to make one. Approve Barbara LeBombard, city clerk, with a March 31st, 2022 expiration date. That's in the form of a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments?
Yes, I'd like to say, Barbara, I'm sorry, but I cannot not say something.
I warned her you would say something.
Yeah.
Honest to God, I've been on the council since there's been a council, and without you, we would be lost. We are very lucky in this community that we have a clerk who not only just does her job, but she's dedicated to the improvement of this community. And I'll give you an example. We were discussing our ranked choice voting, a very difficult decision at the Charter Committee. She came as our Director of Elections and put her heart and soul into looking at that, gave us a huge pamphlet of data. We didn't ask for it. She just wanted to do it because she cares about our community. We are extremely lucky, and if I could give her a Mike Trout-like contract, I would.
That's good.
I really have to say, we're lucky, and I hope she never retires, at least not until I leave. Thank you, Barbara.
JP.
I have to say something. I did the last time you were appointed and the time before that and since the beginning. Barb, you have been an ambassador for our community in your position as city clerk. Folks come into the city and they visit your office. You are just absolutely even-handed, welcoming to everyone who comes through that door, regardless of their social status, their disability any type of status. You are remarkable. You are exactly what this city is about. So thank you so much for staying with us, and we're not going to let you go.
Yeah, don't ask to be retired, sorry.
Yeah, not happening.
Okay, any further comments? Counselor Zaret.
I think give credit where credit's due, and I know I've been here for much less time than the two of you who've already commented, but I'd say from the day that I took out papers to run to just recently when I submitted agenda items, Barbara's always been friendly, she's been professional, she's gone above and beyond any of the work that I would expect. She helps me format items that are potentially not well formatted, checks in, makes sure that things are done properly for things I'm submitting. She's the cornerstone, along with her colleague Marianne. But I think that we would be in a much worse place that we had a clerk other than Barbara. So thank you for all the work you do.
I would say that all of us that sit behind this desk know that if there is a glue that holds us together, Barbara's the one that administers it. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Did I make a motion for
Not for Marianne. Why don't we
Okay.
do that separately? Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve Marianne Giza as the Assistant City Clerk with an expiration of March 31st, 2022.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Marianne Giza, Assistant City Clerk, March 31st, 2022. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
May I say something before you close this meeting?
No, I wasn't done with all my business.
Oh,
but
okay. After
If you
before
need
you
to,
close,
you
I just
go,
want to make a
because
comment.
this seems important.
No, I just I just really wanted to thank the appointment subcommittee for all the work they do, because I think that previously there was a perception that potentially the subcommittee could act more as a rubber stamp, and I'm not saying that's accurate, but I will say that I really appreciate the thoroughness and the robustness of vetting all of these appointees, the discussion that's actually had, and really making sure that the people who are appointed really are appropriate to be appointed. That's all I wanted to say, and I appreciate the guidance of the chairperson, Tana, and the other members. I just think,
Thank you.
yes. So,
Thank you very
anyhow.
much. Thank you, and you're welcome.
A love fest.
I seriously, wow. I would like to make a motion to move the mayoral appointment of, I may not pronounce this correctly, Cathay Parker to the Commission on Disability with a term expiration of 12/31/2021. I'd like to move that to the appointment subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second to move to appointment subcommittee, the appointment of Cathay Parker, Commission Disability. Just questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Our next meeting will be on April 3rd at 5:30 p.m. Thus concludes.
Okay, ordinance, Councilor Derby.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. So ordinance has been meeting, and we do have, so our first meeting that we had was to look at the cannabis equity zoning ordinance that Councilor Zaret put forward. And we did look at that, we debated it, and we decided to recommend it forward. And so the process now is that it is going to go to the planning board, and it's going to come back to our committee. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to move the cannabis equity zoning ordinance amendments to the planning board and to the ordinance subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to move to the planning board, the cannabis equity application amendment. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. President. And so what that does is now that triggers the planning board getting the proposed ordinance, and then we will have a joint public hearing with them, which then will get a recommendation from them, and then it will come back to the full council with a recommendation from our subcommittee, the planning board, and then we'll have our full public hearing. We also met last week, and we looked at the request to consider an adoption of welcoming community trust ordinance that was put forward by Councilor Gomez and Councilor Coniff. We had a robust discussion. It was really interesting to hear how this ordinance would support and reinforce the policy that's already in place in Easthampton, the strong and intelligent policies that we have for community policing. And we are going to be continuing that discussion on next Tuesday, the 26th at 5:15, hopefully in these chambers if we can get them. But we'll see.
Not sure.
Okay. And 5:15. Yep.
5:15?
5:15. So that's next Tuesday, the 26th at 5:15. Okay. And if there is, that's fine. We can find another spot for that. And you know, as we move forward on that Tuesday meeting, that is going to be specifically, we're going to be looking at the Welcoming Community Trust Ordinance. I am going to request that we put some other things on our agenda, so if we decide that we have time to discuss them, then we will have that flexibility. We have decided to have a reoccurring ordinance subcommittee meeting, and that is going to be the second and fourth Tuesdays. And I believe the time that we agreed on was 5:15. So that is going to be the new ordinance regular time. It's second and fourth Tuesdays of each month, 5:15. And with the length of the issue and the complexity of the issues we have on our docket, we might need to meet more than that as well. So that concludes.
Great. Was that second and fourth?
Second and fourth.
Right, okay, great, thank you.
The school committee's up here, the 26th, is that the date?
Okay. So we will have to.
Their meeting's at 6, it's.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, maybe that's why we had originally been at 5.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, we'll do it in 45. We're good. Yeah.
Okay, property, Councilor Kwasinski.
Yes, the property committee met last week to discuss a proposal for the city to have an easement across the easternmost section of the property on Park Street where a solar array will be going in. In order to build the solar array, a permit is needed, a building permit. And one of the conditions of the permit, or of the planning board, is that the city accept an easement on the parcel that we're talking about. The overall theory here is that that little strip of land will then connect with additional land that the city will have, and there's a chance that we can very well, over the next many years, have an easement and a trail that goes through several different properties, and the city obtains another trail site. We had been in favor of this, had voted 3-0, and we're not going to bring it forward tonight because we had actually been, the representative from the solar company was very helpful, and he was unable to be with us tonight, so we're going to bring that forward at our next meeting when he is available. This concludes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Rules and Government Relations, Councilor Rist.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Peak.
Sorry, Tom, you're gonna get
Councilor
that.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you, Mr. President.
Peak. Old habits.
Let's see where we start. Okay, so we no longer have municipal light plants on our agenda. 17D, Councilor Rist had proposed a rule. We discussed it a good deal at the last meeting. That, just for the benefit of anyone watching, basically sets some standards for how a city councilor accesses the city attorney. And so we had worked on some language in subcommittee that basically just incorporated some of the suggested amendments that my colleagues had made, so that we, because there was just a bunch of them and we were kind of jammed up figuring how to reconcile all of that. So do you all have before you yep, you have the language. Okay. So this is basically what we have had landed on. It has it saying, all requests for city attorney, whether generated by a council committee or an individual councilor, must first be approved by the city council president. In the absence of the president, the vice president must review the request. All reviews must be completed within 5 days. Should the request be denied, an override by a majority of the city council may be obtained. And so that is what we landed on, and at this time, I would like to make a motion to adopt Rule 17D, City Attorney Request for Opinion.
Second.
Okay, well, a motion and a second to accept Rule 17D, the city attorney request as written in front of us and described by Councilor Peak. Additional questions or comment, Councilor Zaret?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an amendment I'd like to recommend. Is this the appropriate
Yep.
place to do it? I was just reflecting on while I like the timeframe proposal, it also occurred to me that what would we do in the case that a request was made and then not responded to? And so I'd like to request an amendment to follow all reviews must be completed within 5 days. Language that states non-response by the president shall be construed as approval by default.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, as just previously read by Councilor Zaret. Additional questions or comments, Councilor Kwasinski?
Should we clarify by saying decision maker, since it could be the president or the vice president?
Yeah, or maybe
Who
president
could be
slash
responsible?
vice president.
Yeah, slash.
Slash vice president.
Right.
Yeah, or it could be, you could just cut out by the president, and just say non-response shall be, yeah.
Construed.
Would you like to redo your motion then?
Yes, I'd like to, after thorough feedback from my colleagues, I'd like to suggest I will withdraw my previous amendment and make the following in its place.
Okay.
Non-response to a request shall be construed as approval by default.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second to approve the amendment of previously read by Councilor Zaret. Additional questions or comments on that amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, amendment passes. So now, the acceptance of Rule 17D as amended. We have a second for that, right?
Yeah,
All
well, it
those-
was already
yeah.
moved. It
All
was
those
already-
in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
I wasn't as loud
Great.
as him this
Okay.
So the last thing on, well, I'll actually start with the, so the thing remaining on our agenda is the overquota liquor licenses. And I have language for that before me. When we met, there was some discussion of that maybe being something that we would want to schedule a public hearing on. I could go either way, really. I don't.
Is it required?
It's not required.
If it's not
And
required.
historically, we
I think
have
it-
not.
I would say
Then we
it's
should.
definitely important, since every other time we did over quota licenses, it generated issues. I'm not sure it will at this time, but I think we should.
I think we've had mixed. I think early on we did, but the last group we didn't, I don't think.
No, when we did the last bulk group, we didn't have, and we've never had a public hearing. And I've done personally 5 of these.
Councilor Riss?
I would like to consider Council Derby's history on this, and I would say we don't need it. Also, I would like to say that this is a big economic development matter because, as we discussed at the committee level, restaurants are moving into town, and without a liquor license, they cannot succeed. So this will help us grant them those licenses, so.
All right.
That's just my opinion, anyway.
In that case, I would like to make, I'm not sure quite the language. I would like to make a motion to petition the legislature for these overquoted licenses.
I think you need to
Oh,
read the
okay,
whole
I'll read the
thing.
whole thing. Buckle up, guys.
Or just
Oh.
the top part, right?
Just
Yeah,
the
I got
top
it.
part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I would make a motion to accept an act authorizing the city of Easthampton to grant 8 additional licenses for the sale of all alcoholic beverages to be drunk on the premise, 4 additional licenses for the sale of wine and malt beverages to be drunk on the premises, and 2 additional licenses for the sale of wine and malt beverages to be drunk off the premises.
Second.
There's a second. Council.
Is that wording baked? Like, is that the legal wording, or is that our wording?
I found an almost identical wording from Tewksbury that is going through the process. So it is rather standard.
Okay. I was just gonna change the word drunk to consumed, but
No,
it just
that's the
struck
way
me
they-
as kind of funny.
No, that is the way this.
All
I would
righty.
agree, that's funny, but that's the state.
All righty.
So I didn't get to chime in on all the accolades for our city clerk, but I would like to thank her again here, that she did a lot of research finding the wording for this, and I think Councilor Derby will appreciate what's happened in these quotas in the past is they have sort of died in the building. If that building, for instance, Platinum Pony, that license is there, and unless someone happened to move in that wanted to use a liquor license. So this is worded so that if that business is no longer there, it will come back to the city and it can be reassigned to another location. So it's a nice tool that we didn't use before. So so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion passes.
And finally, I would like to make a motion to move Councilor Zaret's firearms safety and against gun violence resolution to the Rules and Government Relations Subcommittee.
I'll second
Okay.
that.
A motion and a second to move the Rules and Regulations the resolution for firearms safety against gun violence. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
Thus concludes.
Great. Charter Review Committee, Councilor Rist.
Yes, we had robust debate over ranked choice voting. Once again, I must thank Councilor Peak, whose passion for this brought us a lot of information. Also, our city clerk and Director of Elections, Barbara Bombard, who also gave us a lot of information. We ended up deciding that we wanted ranked choice voting for the most important position we have currently, and that's the mayor, and that was adopted. We will have another meeting this Wednesday. That's a change in meeting time on the 27th. I want to inform the council that at that time we're going to debate the process moving forward. We're running up against a legislative deadline to move items that will require a ballot, and things like ranked choice voting, and if we do terms of office changes. Those deadlines are coming up on us. So at the next meeting, I'll inform the council when you'll see the documents that we want to send to the legislature at the beginning of the summer in June. That does not stop us from continuing to debate further changes, because we can put as many legislative special acts to the state as we want. So we are going to consider more items that go. But the state may decide which of these items. I believe the committee wants ranked choice voting, and if we do terms of office on a ballot, I don't think the state will let us do it without it being on the ballot. But that's what I'm going to inform the council as to the process moving forward. Barbara's been very good about helping us with the legislative act language and those kinds of things. So there's been a tremendous amount of work, and I want to thank the counselors on the committee and the 4 members of the community that have paid a lot of attention to everything that we've been dealing with. Next meeting is next week, and we will continue to deal with Article 7 elections, and we will be devoting at least half the meeting on terms of office for the city council and school committee and the mayor, whether we want to change it to 4 years or something else. So that will be on the agenda if you're interested in attending. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe we have no old business. We've gone through the no business, so unless there's anyone else comments.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, see you April 3rd.
We have to sign the appropriate